Hello everyone and welcome to First Web Designer. Today is yet another episode, another try for us to teach you how to get and show you how to get more clients as a web designer, because obviously it's never really hard for us, to acquire the technical skills, but it's much harder to really get those clients, long-lasting clients and those clients that are worth your time. And of course today again I'm not on my own. I've got someone very special, a special guest on the show with me, who's been specializing on positioning yourself the right way to get your customers. He's had more than 20 guest appearances on other publications and other podcasts. Of course, he's also a friend of Paul Jarvis, our beloved Paul Jarvis, as well as he's been on Smart Passive Income with Pat Flynn. And, Philip just says that there is no really need anymore for salespeople, salesperson. He specializes in education-based, as he says, education-based content marketing, marketing automation, and digital outreach to make that all happen. Welcome on the show, Philip. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, James. I'm very good today. Thank you.
So jumping then straight into the show, perhaps the best way to start, I always ask my guests to start off by sharing a little bit of, the background of why are you doing this? Why aren't you, hiring a salesperson? Why did you decide that there's no need for one?
So, I've been self-employed for, let me do the math here, it's about 7 years. And well, let's see. Yeah, that's about right. 2008 is when I became self-employed. And I started working for myself as a freelance writer, essentially. So that's how I describe myself to clients. And I had no preparation to be in business for myself. It happened kind of by accident, as I think it does for a lot of other people. And it was a struggle the whole time. From, I mean, I guess there was a honeymoon period at first, but it quickly became a struggle where I felt like I was not in control of my business. And so I felt like my business depended on luck. It depended on other people's actions more so than my own. And it had a very up and down quality to it. And that led me to a point where I just wanted to quit. And I started looking for a job. This was about 2 years ago. And I didn't like the feeling of looking for a job. It felt like sort of a defeat, and it wasn't very much fun either to be filling out job applications. Of course, I was looking, I had a lot of skill that I felt was very valuable, and the process of applying for a job made me feel like I had done something wrong. So I gave it another try, and I tried working for myself in a different way than I ever had before. And part of that involved becoming a specialist in a certain area, taking all the, tens or dozens of things that I could do, and deciding to focus very specifically on one of those and one specific target audience. And as a part of doing that, I learned about the benefits of positioning myself, my business, in a very specific way, and got so excited about that I wrote a very small book about it called The Positioning Manual for Technical Firms. And here I am on your show today.
Wow, as always, yeah, no, I'm glad that it comes from, in a way, a little bit of pain, perhaps not
Yeah,
physical pain, but more emotional pain and frustration, and that's when
yeah.
the greatest things happen. And so, since you started using this kind of approach, what has happened? Well, obviously,
Well,
you still keep going because something is going right.
yeah. At least two things happened, maybe three. The first is that marketing myself became many times easier. So I had always had the experience. Well, I had always known that I should market myself and my business, but it never worked. I would write, I would, people said you should do content marketing. So I would write blog articles. Nothing would happen. The phone would not start ringing. I would go meet people at networking events, And rarely would anything happen unless it was a lucky night. And I happened to run into someone who needed a writer. And I would work for agencies and get frustrated because I had no control in the project and really just was being handed work and expected to be kind of a pair of hands to get the work done. So, the first thing that happened is that marketing myself actually became a lot easier because all of a sudden, when I said, what should I write blog articles about in my email marketing? What should I write about? The answer was very clear because I was only trying to speak to one audience, which uh, ultimately it was a process. And I want people to know that positioning yourself is always a process. But ultimately, that audience was small and medium sized software development shops is is who I try to help. Uh, I know that some of your listeners are going to be coming from the more creative end of the spectrum, and the concepts apply. Some of the examples I give may not directly apply, but the concepts of positioning yourself apply to actually every kind of business. So that's the first thing that happened is marketing got a lot easier, and all of a sudden, not overnight, but very quickly, my marketing started working. People would respond because the way I was writing blog articles and, email campaigns actually resonated with a specific type of person and the specific problems that they have. The second thing that happened is I felt more empowered and business started going better. And I stopped feeling like I was at the whim of luck, and I stopped depending on referrals quite so much. Referrals are great, don't get me wrong, but they started making up a smaller percentage of my revenue.
So,
So to keep it simple, those are the two main things that I saw happen.
yeah, so by the sounds of it, the logical start would be, of course, finding first of all the niche, figuring out what the niche is that niche of the audience that you want to resonate with, and then position yourself as an expert. Um, okay, so now regards setup, because obviously we as web designers, we usually have a website of our
Hmm.
agency, a portfolio. Some do price list or a place where
Hmm.
you can do quotes. Some have started, of course, to do their own blogs on their own websites. But so, what
Right.
is your setup? Perhaps there is somewhere the base, the home, where people can get in touch with you, and then you get out somewhere. And how do you position yourself? Do you write for, I don't know, Forbes and places like that?
So the first step really is an exploration of your own interests, your own previous experience, even and I'm going to get an answer to your question here in a moment about what are the mechanics of how I market myself. But the starting point really is understanding what you have to bring to the table as a freelancer, what and that does involve understanding your skills, but I like to encourage people to take it to the next step of understanding how their skills actually matter to their clients, to their best clients, in fact. So it's a process of narrowing down a long list of these are the 10 or 20 things that I can do to usually two or three, maybe even just one problem that you solve for a client. So it's really both a process of exploration and a shift in mindset of starting to think when my clients are happy to hire me, it's usually because I'm solving a problem for them or creating some kind of beneficial result. What is that one thing and what's that one audience where I really want to focus? So once you've done that, you've done the most important thing. Everything else is secondary. The mechanics of how I market myself are actually pretty simple. So I have a website, and if you go to my website, it's not beautiful. Okay. The website is philipmorganconsulting.com. And there's just one L in Philip. So if people want to see an example of what I'm talking about, but it speaks very clearly to who I'm trying to help, what I can do for them, and how I help them. So parts of that came out in your intro at the top of this interview. I help development shops. I help them get more leads. I do so by using education-based content marketing. marketing automation, and positioning to create that result. So those are the three elements really of a good positioning statement: is who you're helping, what you're doing for them, and maybe how you do it or how you do it differently than others. And there's a lot of text on my website. I'm not a designer. So it's one column, big font, lots of text. I'm just trying to say, here's what I can do for you. Here's all the different things I offer, because I don't just do services. I have some educational products, and I can coach people, or I can do it for them. So there's a number of ways, kind of a ladder of services that I can provide to my clients. And there's a ton of opt-in forms on the site, because I'm a big believer in using email marketing to build trust over time with your clients. So there's that. Google sends me some traffic, which is fine, but it doesn't send me a lot of traffic. And I've done a modest amount of SEO work, but I don't really depend on Google for traffic. I go out into the world in things like this, in podcast guest appearances, and I sort of get my own traffic by doing that. And it's a lot easier than people think to go out and send traffic back to your site by, giving a talk or writing a guest post or appearing on a podcast. Those tend to send back higher quality traffic. And I'm sending, traffic back, either usually not sending it back to the homepage of my site, but sending it to a landing page where I have some kind of offer, like, a crash course on positioning, or that's my primary opt-in right now. So that's a good example. And then I try to build up a relationship over time by providing value. So it's a very simple marketing system. I'm not doing anything exotic. There's no sophisticated AdWords strategy or or Facebook advertising strategy. Those are great ways to scale when you have a really good thing that's already working. Then you can scale it by paying for traffic, but I don't do that right now.
No, I can totally resonate. Yeah, for example, regards Google, it's just like you mentioned at the beginning how you wouldn't want to, just to rely on someone like salesperson. The same on Google. We've seen it happen as well. Our website has been impacted since Google just changed their mind. Let's change algorithm. Boom, you get affected. But this kind of thing, what you talk to me about, it's there. It's in the history. Whatever changes, it's there. You did the speech. We see your personality, so that is great. Um, Talking specifically now about the web designers, of course, you specialize on development shops, you have done a lot of consulting work. So perhaps you've seen potential, obstacles, potential hardship, because obviously it sounds easy the way you explain, but I believe there is, first of all, some obstacles in people's mindsets, in your clients' mindsets, as well as perhaps could be even with the whole setup they already have. So what sort of things we should watch out for as web designers if we want to acquire this kind of system?
You should watch out for your own, as you said, your own mindset. It's very easy, and I know this because I was in this place for 5 years, to believe that by broadening and working with a wider range of clients, you will gain security. So here's how that works in your mind. If I can do more things, then more people will want to hire me. That's sort of the mental way that's at least how it worked for me. So if I can, and I'll describe the situation I was in. So I was a writer. That meant I could do things like write web copy, white papers, case studies. And then I also had some experience in the educational side of things. So I would also create like e-learning, and like write the scripts for product videos and that kind of thing. So I felt like the more of those types of things I could do, the more secure my business would be. That's not how it worked for me in reality. And I see a lot of people where that's not how it works for them, because they kind of become like, the general store, the convenience store at a gas station, where there's a little bit of everything. But if you wanted the best of something, that's not where you would go. You would not go to, in the States, we have Walmart. I don't know if you have that where you live, but it's an example of a place that has a wide variety of offerings, but none of them are known as high quality or particularly desirable. So the better customers, the ones who have money to spend, don't shop at Walmart unless they have to. They shop at stores that are a little more exclusive. And so to tie this back to what I was saying, I was really setting myself up to be a commodity. I had, I wasn't doing anything to appear like my skills were desirable or in demand. So that's the first barrier is this mindset that there's security in being a generalist. And I think a lot of us start out there, and I think a lot of people make it work. But if you want more choice over the types of clients that you take on, I think the way to do that is to become more narrow in your focus. And so then if you say, okay, I'm going to do that, I'm going to be more narrow in my focus, all kinds of fear kicks in just from out of nowhere. All of a sudden, you start fearing the thing that is going to make your business better. It becomes terrifying because you're afraid that if you specialize in one of five skills that you have, you're going to automatically have 20% of the clients, which is not true because new clients will become interested in you because you're a specialist. Um, you will fear that you're an imposter. You will fear that, wait, if I claim to be an expert in WordPress membership sites, what if I'm not enough of an expert? What if people find out that I just started doing this 2 months ago and say, well, you can't be an expert. You've only been doing this for 2 months. Those things almost never happen. Okay. I've had clients who were not happy with my work, but they never said, Philip, I just don't think you're actually an expert at this. They just, it that never came up. And I don't think it ever does. But it's a fear that we experience is the fear of, it's called imposter syndrome, the fear of being found out that, we don't have that expertise. But the reality is with expertise, if you know maybe 20, 30% more about a subject than another person does, relative to them, you are an expert. And a lot of times that's all it takes to create significant value for that person. So the ego takes over and starts, fearing that we're going to be found out when really what we need to do is focus on how much value can I create with the knowledge that I have. And when you apply that knowledge to the right kind of problem, you can create a ton of value, which creates, a ton of income if you if you know how to price your services properly. So I don't want to ramble on forever, but there's several fears that are going to come up for most people because it just feels kind of unnatural to narrow down our scope. Another is a fear of boredom. I'm not going to get into that, but that's another one is what if I get bored? Will I be doing the same thing over and over again? Let's say I'm a general or WordPress developer and I decide to focus just on membership sites. That's a really handy example, but that's not the only thing you could focus on. There's the fear that you're going to get bored. And you tend to forget that there's an incredible amount of variety that comes up just as a part of running a business, not to mention that each client is going to bring you a slightly different challenge that could have very different implications about what you do in that project. So, James, those are some of the fears. Those are, I guess, the top three.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've heard them. I've seen them before. People keep talking about them. Yes, of course, because all of us, we are humans, and obviously these fears we all have in common. But then, as you were talking towards the end of this, you mentioned, lots of money. Who wouldn't want lots of money? And obviously, lots of money comes from, uh, scaling, from growing the business. And I guess that's in a way, kind of a trap. What I'm talking about is that when we have managed to convince, say, for instance, web designers to niche down,
Mm-hmm.
they have niched down too much. Some of them, for instance, niche down that they're gonna have web design clients who, basically, people who create bathrooms, but in particular, only those companies who do gold-plated bathtubs, so narrow. It's like, how many companies are there that I can serve? I mean, at some point I'll hit the wall. That's it. So there'll be no income, no scaling. Is
Right.
that legitimate fear? Not fear, a trap?
Well, two things I'd like to say to that. The first is scaling is not the only way you can get more revenue. It is definitely a good way, and for a lot of people, what they want to do is add headcount and sort of become an agency. And I give that the thumbs up. But one of the primary benefits of positioning yourself, whether you have become an agency or you're still a solo person, is that you reduce competition. There are become fewer alternatives to hiring you. So let's take your example of building websites for companies that install bathrooms. If you positioned yourself that way, there would automatically be fewer alternatives to hiring you. Okay, because no longer can someone do a Google search for WordPress developer and come up with 5,000 options to hiring you. There might be only 5 or 10, and if you're focusing on a geography instead of working remotely, that number is going to be even smaller. And people just tend to go for the safer option. And so in the client's mind, you become less risky when you are specialized on something because it's easier for them to believe that you can actually get the job done. If you claim to be able to use an analogy, if you said, I can repair any car that's ever been made, and, you know, and someone compares you against someone who specializes just in the kind of car they have, they're probably going to go, if they can afford it, for the specialist, because whose claim is more believable? The person who says, I can do anything, or the person who says, I don't try to do everything. I just am really good at fixing this one kind of car. So I think the same thing is going to happen. Now, the second part of that is it possible to specialize too far? And sure, it is. It's unlikely. It's very unlikely because, first of all, most people's survival instinct is going to fight them the whole time they're trying to specialize. And it's going to prevent them from doing something like saying, I will only build a website for you if you install gold-plated bathtubs, right? But if somebody did that, they would own that market. I guarantee you they would own that market. Nobody who installs gold-plated bathtubs would consider a different web developer. But that's probably too small of a niche to be viable. However, it's just very rare, I think, that people go that far because their instincts are fighting them the whole way anyway. So they tend to hold back a little bit. The first time someone positions themselves more narrowly, and actually I think this is a good idea, is don't try to go all the way. Just maybe what's the next step up in specificity? So if you're a generalist website developer, maybe you say that you're only going to help membership sites or e-commerce using a certain framework like WooCommerce or what have you. Just one more step of specificity. It's a good way to try it out without going for the gold-plated bathtub level of specificity.
Yeah, no, it is a good example. Yeah, obviously I took a bit of extreme, but that's one of the things that people worry. Can I niche down too much, and end up having a handful of clients because that's all there is. Yeah, of course, if I go narrow as narrow as bathroom installers who do only gold-plated bathtubs, I'll be the only one, perhaps, in that niche. But
You'll
say, for
probably win 100% of the proposals you put out there
yeah, no,
if you go that narrow. And what would that be like? That would feel pretty good.
exactly. Unless there are maybe 5 companies across the whole world, it's not,
Right.
is it? But say, okay, so we don't go as far. We go, again, you mentioned membership sites. So, for instance, me and you and many others that are membership site developers, we use your technique. We go out there, we position ourselves, we go out and ourselves do appearances, get the traffic that way. There's still competition because I'm not on my own. Usually, of course, you compete with the price, race to the bottom, which is not something we suggest. But
Mm-hmm.
how can you compete then? I guess if you are solopreneur, then obviously a good way, of course, is your personality. if unless your friends say that you're not really a likable person, what are the ways you can compete? Because I mean, your article will appear next to my article on Forbes. We're both talking about membership sites. So
Right.
how?
Well, then it becomes more of a question of how big is the market? Certainly, if you take a broad view and look at all markets everywhere, there are markets that are getting bigger and there are markets that are getting smaller. What's a good example? Well, I mean, just in computer technology, the market for I don't know. I'm failing to come up with a great example. I mean, the market for dial-up modems is very small. I imagine there are still a few being made, but it's a much smaller market than it used to be. That's a very outdated example, but hopefully everyone can relate to that. So you do need to do some research as a part of positioning yourself, especially if you're moving into a niche that is unfamiliar to you. And I would never advise someone to just close their eyes and jump. They need to do a little bit of research. So there are ways, even from the comfort of your own office desk, to get a sense of the size of a market. Google puts a lot of tools at your fingertips for doing that. And in my book, I have some others. For instance, once you've positioned yourself, you can do something you could never do before as a generalist. You can go to LinkedIn and get a list of names of actual human beings who could sign a check for your services. And I know as a generalist, I could never do that because I did not know who I was trying to sell to. So you can use research tools like Google, LinkedIn, Google, Zoom Info to start to get a sense of who else is in the market for membership sites, who's selling those same services. Because again, now you have something that's specific enough that when you go to search on Google, you're not going to get 5 million results, right? If you search for, membership site developers, and then you go to the leading, say, 5 or 10 WordPress plugins for membership sites and see who their recommended developers are, because they're almost all going to do that, right? They're going to have a list of development partners. And you go to, Zoom Info or LinkedIn, or different localities have different, business data search services. You can start to put together a pretty good picture of what kind of market you're getting into. And then you can do some other things. The Internet Archive is, the Internet Archive Wayback Machine that stores old versions of websites. You can start to look at how your soon-to-be competitors have changed their site over time. Did they just start doing membership sites 3 months ago? Have they been doing it for 10 years? How established are they in that niche? And when you start putting together all those pieces of information, you get a much better picture of what you're getting into. And yes, if it's a bad idea, you should start to know by doing some research. And then, of course, the last thing you can do is talk to your clients. Hey, if we're thinking about doing this thing, clients love to be asked to give you their input on your business, because, that makes anybody feel important when you consult them for help. So you can start asking your clients, hey, do you know anybody who needs this thing that we did for you? We're thinking about specializing it, and we want to kind of test the market before we make a big move. So those are all things you can do to take risk out of it. But at the end of the day, business involves taking calculated risks, and then you should do the calculations before you take the risk. So
Yeah, no, exactly.
my thoughts.
Calculated risk, exactly. Yeah, there wouldn't be point anymore going into this if it wasn't for the risk. Otherwise, we would still be. Otherwise, you would have gone and applied for the jobs that you felt like, no, this is not my way of doing things. I would like a bit of risk. We are slowly heading towards the end of the show, but I still have one question which you kind of touched accidentally a little bit regarding dial-up modems. So what if, I don't know if you have had such a case. What if a person, an agency, solopreneur, freelancer, is already in a niche already made
Hmm.
himself more or less known in a niche that is getting smaller and smaller, and he is like, man, there's danger. How can I?
Hmm.
Is there a way to reposition, or you're going with the ship down to the bottom?
You can reposition your business. It's not over for you. But you have to realize that you need to take control of the situation. So positioning is not. I think it's probably clear to people. Positioning is not something you can do magically to make things better. Positioning is finding out what people need and positioning yourself as the solution to that need. In very simple terms, that's really what it is. So I would start by looking. You need to start by looking for something else that you could, uh, reposition yourself into a different. It could be a different audience, the same skill. It could be a different skill for the same audience. It's always easier if you, especially if you've become known for something. It's easier to make a transition and keep the same audience than try to build up a new audience from scratch. Because audience building is big work, and the people who do it make a really good living because the barriers to entry are high. So in general, I would say if there's any way you can do something different for your current audience that they need more, do that instead of building a new audience. But you would step one would be to start looking, start researching what could be a viable, growing market that we could move into, that we could transition into. The easy part is acquiring the new skill. I mean, unless you're just sick of what you do and unwilling to invest the time to learn, the easy part is always acquiring the new skill. The hard part is marketing yourself consistently for long enough to get traction with that new positioning. So, just in brief, I would I would encourage people who are in that situation of a shrinking market, like modems are not the most current example. I mean, it could be that doing brochure websites for certain businesses is a shrinking market because there are now like productized consulting services that will do that for you, or fixed cost services, or Squarespace is like a viable option for a lot of people if they need just a really simple website. So maybe that's an example of a shrinking market. It would not be hard to get out of that market and get into a different market by specializing. And time frame 6 to 12 months realistically to reposition yourself, um, depending on how big of a move you're making. But you can get from being a nobody to being somebody people have heard of in 6 months if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess that kind of answered the question, because like you said, the easiest part should be acquiring the new skill, doing a bit of research. What's the new market you're going to tackle? The hardest, the most scariest perhaps is when you've done all these guest appearances, you are known for something. Imagine you go for the dentist, you turn up one day, sorry, I'm carpenter now. It's like, man, what happened? It's like you're known. There's so much evidence of you online doing this thing, and now, it can't just delete it. People might be coming to you, and you're like, no, I don't do it anymore. So might be a bit of dirty situation, tricky.
It is. There's an inertia that builds up when you get known for something. And so if you are in that position, and actually, I know people who've gone through this, so I can say from their experience, you will still get emails and inquiries from people who are inviting you to do the thing you're leaving behind. And that will make it even harder to do this transition because you'll say, I feel like I'm abandoning this thing that was working. But as a part of a strategic move, you will actually just harm yourself if you try to keep a foot in both worlds. So once you've decided and done the research, you need to move and be consistent. The other way, I suppose, to deal with it is to set up a new identity, not like a new passport, a new driver's license. I mean, a new business identity, and start building up that new business identity and kind of let the old one naturally die off. But it needs to be a really completely different identity so people are not confusing in their mind those two positions that you're trying to occupy at the same time.
Okay, Yeah, that's a good example, and especially because you said, you dealt with someone who's had to go through this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, okay, so that really answers the question. Thank you for that. We have to, unfortunately, finish this time, and the conversation has been going so smooth and so slow in a good way, because, we can digest nice and deep. It's not like bam, bam, bam,
Yeah, yeah.
quickly go over it, cover many topics. So, I mean, this hopefully will lead us to one more episode at least, if you're happy to do it, especially if we're gonna read the comments later, see what kind of questions audience still have and tackle those.
That would be my pleasure. I think that's a great idea to see what specific questions people ask, and then have another segment where we deal with those in more depth.
Um, Before I let you go, then I guess it's a little shameless plug uh, about where people can find you. You mentioned Crash Course as well. How can they get in touch with you?
Thank you. The thing I want most is for people to see if positioning is right for them. So I've created a crash course. It's, I think, 6 or 7 emails, probably 5 or 6 minutes per email. It's very little time investment. And you can find that the actual link is long. Here's the short link. It's a bit.ly link. So bit.ly/positioning crash course. So again, it's bit.ly/positioning crash course. That'll take you to a sign up page, tell you what it's about. And that's really my only goal is for people to see if this can help them or not. I think for a lot of people it can. It is sort of a question of whether the timing's right in your business to make this kind of move. But if it is, I can tell you the results are tremendous.
Okay, then just to get clear again on the URL, there's no dashes between, just one.
Okay. Yeah, all one word. So it's bit.ly/ and then positioning crash course, all lowercase, all one word, no dashes, spaces.
Okay,
Just
we'll
like,
include
yeah,
it in the show notes.
just
Show notes as
one
well.
one big run-on sentence.
All right then. Thank you once again, Philip. And I guess, yeah, let's see what what audience wants to know more. And we'll be in touch and do one more episode. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise, it was great to talk to you, James.